sign of the times. Organic and natural, happening and fashionable, live on stage or mingling in the crowd. Relive this history, peer into the reflections of how Buttamilk got down.
3, 2, 1.
Hello, Unity Day 94. I am Jill Scott.
And I am Tiffany Clark. We are Clark and Scott.
Before we even begin, let us define poetry.
Poetry is representation,
Symbolization,
indication,
communication,
modulation,
shading, interpretation.
Today we would like to share with you our words of expression by starting out defining you.
Is this black?
My name is Miss Jill Scott. I am a writer, actress, vocalist, philanthropist, and most importantly, I'm a mom. In 1994, I was working at Cachet, which was a clothing store in Center City, Philadelphia, on Walnut Street. I was in school. I was studying to be an English teacher. I was doing poetry readings around the city, which didn't pay very much. Sometimes I would get $15, sometimes $24, nothing that ever really got me anywhere, but it might have got me lunch or something. How did I get introduced to Buttermilk? Honestly, I don't remember how or who introduced me to Buttermilk. I think it was like something to do, and I went. I'm not sure if I went by myself. I cannot remember, honestly. I just remember going and feeling a vibe. It was a lot of really cool poetry and music. Marv was playing great music, introducing us to artists I'd never heard of, artists that I was going to eventually be working with, but I had no idea. How would I describe the Buttermilk vibe? It was blackety black, I'll tell you that. There would be poets like Stephanie Renee and Rich Medina and Ayana and Riva would show up, and I wanted to read. I wanted to read my poetry too. It had a stage, first of all, because a lot of the places that we would perform, it felt like we were in our living rooms, October Gallery was one that I went to quite a bit. But Buttermilk, it made you feel like you were a real artist, a real poet. I think that's what made it unique, was that it was dark and that it did have a microphone and it had lights, it had a DJ. You could tell the DJ what kind of vibe you wanted, what kind of music you wanted to hear behind your poem. Sometimes people would come up and sing. I did a couple of times as well. But it felt like a real thing, like a real stepping stone to what eventually would come. How I've grown is that I've been able to travel, blessed to travel and see so many new things, taste so many new flavors. I've been to Japan, Australia. I've been to Germany, Paris, London. I'm now 24 years into my career as a vocalist and a writer. Those moments being on Buttermilk stage, it gave me an opportunity to fail, which is really, really important. Nobody was, paying me at the time for anything. So going up there and being in front of a real audience that clapped or snapped or, shouted or, said your name, it was exciting. It made me brave. Because being on stage, I don't care what anybody says, is very scary. And getting that opportunity to try things out, see what works, see what doesn't, feel the energy in the room. That's important as an artist too, to be able to feel the energy in the room, because you might be going left, and if you don't know how to pay attention to that, you can't circle back and recapture the crowd. I do recall singing a Faith Evans song with my friend. He was just my friend then, DJ L Boogie. He would later become my first husband. But I do recall singing there and remembering how that felt. And it felt good. It just felt good. Ursula Rucker, Trapita Mason. Oh my God, I fell for her. I fell for her at October Gallery, but at Buttamilk, oh man. And then they would give us nights. That was so cool. So, there's like an open mic sometimes and everybody would get up, but they had these moments where a poet was featured. And that was very, very special because it meant it was real. It meant that you were an actual poet. That's what it equated to me, that it was real, that I had a job and a purpose, and I could tell people to come see me play or see me read poetry at this place or another. And poets would come from all over the country to come to Buttermilk. I don't know if they were getting paid, but that was so exciting. It made us valid. You understand? It made us feel valid. When I said Buttermilk, it all started with you. I meant exactly that the energy, the lights, the darkness, the microphones. That's when I think I fell in love with performing on a stage, because nothing else felt as good to me. And I definitely I had a lot of jobs. If you go around the city of Philadelphia and there was some place to work, I probably worked there. I probably did. But being at Buttermilk just gave me a confidence. I would walk in and people say, "You're going to read? Are you going to read? I came here to see you." That meant a lot to me. And it started a trend in my spirit to perform. And I'm very, very grateful for that. Thank you, Buttermilk. My name is Jill Scott, also known as Miss Jill Scott, also known as Jilly de Philadelphia. I am a writer. I am a poet. I am a actress, vocalist, and most importantly, I'm a mom.
I love what Jill just offered there, because I think there are a lot of us who graced the Buttermilk stage who absolutely felt like, wow, I'm being featured, that it meant something and it propelled us forward in a real way. So that is the way that we are kicking off the jam-packed episode 5 Artist Spotlight edition of The Sounds of Buttermilk.
That's right. I'm over here smiling hearing you say that, because we meant to do all that. We meant to do that. And what's interesting, I'm learning we didn't articulate it that much. And I don't know how we communicated as people back in the day, but we understood each other. And we understood that if you were going to go left, so to speak, right? If you were going to be the deep brother or sister, right? You need some support with that, because you could feel lonely. You could feel like, okay, everybody telling me I'm deep and I'm special or whatever. We wanted that to be on the stage. We wanted it to be deep. We wanted it to be central. Mm-hmm. Overall, we just wanted it to be sincere. And if you are an artist and you get on the stage and you feel like you can be sincere and you are being received, That's all. That's our. If someone said, "What do you hope to accomplish with this buttermilk?" That's the answer.
That's the grand scheme. Yes, and I got a nickname out of it. So I'm not complaining at all. That Miss Butterworth makes me smile every time I think about it. And that's how I began to be greeted in the street. Because people would come into the venue and that's what they would hear Jean call me. And that was it. That was how one of the ways I was known, and it was special. And we're going to hear from, in this episode, a lot of people who got a clear notion of how they wanted to move in the world from being involved with Buttermilk. And next up, we have some really talented brothers who decided to go to the left coast and really make their fortune that way.
Okay, let's go to the beginning. Kenny and Jean, two of the founders out of the three of Buttermilk. They're my frat brothers. And I was roommates with Kenny and Jean. I had just moved out of the crib. I was trying to move out on my own thing out of grandmom's house. And they had a spot open and wound up moving in with them cats. And pretty much that's how I met Marv. I can't remember if it was like primarily Monday nights, but they would have these sessions where Marv would come over to the apartment and him and Jean, they would sit there and they would make tapes. And I would walk in sometime and they'd be like, shh, shh, shh. I'll come in the apartment, I'm like, and they sit there, they making the tapes. And that's how I got to experience them in the beginning.
You even said it was part of a movement. How would you describe the Philadelphia scene at that time?
It was a very interesting scene. It was like, it was hip hop, it was poetry, it was about just finding an avenue to have a good time without going to something like a club, something a little too crazy. It was just a vibe. It was interesting because I guess it felt like during the times of Gamble and Huff, how that movement, how that whole R&B movement thing happened, it felt like it was the same thing, but for that 90s era, because you had you had Buttermilk, you had I'm thinking of John and them. I can't think of their Come Clean. Forgive me, John. Don't hit me when you see me. Come Clean and their crew and all these other little facets. Buttermilk was like laying that foundation. Because nobody was doing the poetry like that. Nobody was DJing that. Like nobody had like that feel, that sound, that frame of mind that Marv had. A zone that I don't even think people knew they can get into until they realized like, oh, damn, I love hearing that song. Like he played a lot of things that you just don't hear, exposed us to a lot of things we hadn't heard. And so they created that movement, the poetry, and then we'll talk about probably later the comedy, but just that whole vibe. And it was just a movement at the time. The Roots was coming through during that time. Jill's coming through during that time. Janae's coming through so the whole city just had that vibe, and Buttermilk was ahead of it, and definitely forerunners of it.
You're born and raised Philly?
Born and raised in Philly, 15 from Wharton, South Philly. Eagles, Sixers, Flyers, all of it. Brutally, but all of it. Went to St. John Newman High. I went to Catholic school. I went to Catholic school for 12 years. Went to St. Simon's, which is in South Philly, which was a Catholic kindergarten. Then I went to St. Rita's grade school from 1 to 8, and then went to St. John Newman from 9th to 12th. But I was still a kid. After school, you take your shirt out, your pants, you put your sneakers on, put your backpack, wear your pool clothes, so you can walk through the neighborhood. Yeah, so what? I go to Catholic school. I still hang on the corner. But South Philly, born and raised.
Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting too that the specific South Philly perspective, right? Because I don't think a lot of people outside of Philly, you hear a lot about West because of Will, because of Amir, because of Marv, but right. King, there were a lot of folks that were in West, but South had its own thing. It certainly had its own history for Black folks. Yeah. Some of my grandparents are originally from South Philly. They were born and raised in South Philly, but their folks came through the Great Migration.
And part of the history of South Philly is that South Philly was one of the first places that blacks went to, South Street. South Street was all black, and it was one half black, one half Jewish. So at one time, but they had all like the black clubs similar to the Cotton clubs and the Savoy. They had places like that on South Street for black folks. And yeah, South Street, Delhi Street, all that was like all black. And my grandparents would tell me, you know, all the stories and whatnot. But that's how I got to find out that, yeah, there was black folks, you know, started originating in South Philly, and then as times got better and the economics, they started branching out to other parts of the city and suburbs and things of that nature. And that's how we wind up branching off down to Wharton Street, which is about maybe 15, 20 blocks from South Street. And that's how our neighborhood created, because of the black family started to come in from that area, from that South Street area.
I want to hear your perspective on how did comedy start to fold into this movement, this mix of what was being presented on stage, and your role in helping to develop that?
Yeah, let's see. The guys were doing the poetry sets, and I write. I've been a writer for years, so I used to write poetry. And I know one time I wound up hosting one of the poetry shows, excuse me, for whatever reason, I can't remember why, but I wound up doing one of the poetry shows at the North Star Bar. And I'm a clown at times. So I said, I'm gonna try something different. I'm gonna try something different tonight. So I go up to stage, and Gene is, yo, I got Fred, blah, 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 blah. Here you go. So I'm standing there, and I have my little piece of paper in my hand or whatever. And I'm like, 2 for 1, and drinks on the house, and Bacardi, lime, rum, blah, blah. And I'm reading, then I'm like, oh, thank you. And everybody clapping. And I'm like, oh, man, y'all bullshit. I just read the flyer from the table over there. They was like, oh. So I felt bad, because I was like, oh, I just clowned the craft. But at the same time, I was like, this shit is funny. I was also doing comedy at that time. And the guys was pretty much looking at the next thing, the next movement, the next thing to branch into. And pretty much everything was there. They had the connections. They had the connections to the places. They had the crowds. Why not transfer that over to comedy? A ton of comedians that were coming up, trying to find their way, trying to look for a platform. There wasn't a lot of comedy places that you could perform without being a name. Like, you had a funny bone, but then you had to have a name. There wasn't a lot of places you can just go and work out or just go and build the comedy. And so, being as though I was on the circuit, I was like, if you got mud, yo, why not bring all the elements together? And at the time, we was also working with young lady comedian B Flat, who had hosted some shows as well. And that's how that kind of came to be. And yeah, started hosting the Buttamilk comedy shows. Yeah.
I wanted to stay with Fred for a second, because you talked about this movement, how all these arts were coming together, and then comedy became its own separate thing. But we also want to make sure that we acknowledge the kind of platform that you create for yourself that might have in some way been groomed by what you were doing with Buttamilk. But for people who are younger, because Marvin and I know are clear that this is going to be educational for some folks.
Okay, yes.
You had incredible success in a series of commercials that were also rooted in Philly. So talk a little bit about how that campaign came to be, and how that has become a platform for you to move forward and do some other things. And I'm tracking us individually, so don't worry about my dog fluffing his bed in the background. I'm going to mute myself momentarily.
Gotcha. The concept was created by Charles Stone, third Philly brother. And I was friends with him, and I was originally friends with Paul. Who's in the commercial, was a frat brother of mine. And I met Charles in Martha's Vineyard years ago. We all just stayed in contact and hanging out. And when I go up to New York, I hang out over Paul's house and Charles be there. And they had a clubhouse, basically, where everybody just came and just hung out at. And then one day, Charles called and was like, yo, I got this concept based off of some of the things that we do, how we greet each other. I want you to going to shoot at Paul's house. If you can come up to New York, please do. And it was just for his director's reel because he didn't have any narrative, any stories, anything on his reel. And Charles had did like a ton of the Roots. And let's go back. I'm sorry. Charles directed a ton of the Roots music videos. The Choice Is Yours, this to that. 911 is a joke. But he had needed this just something narrative, and he had came up with this concept. So went up to New York, we shot it, and when I looked at it, it was hey, what's up? I'm on the phone. Hey, what you doing? So it was like, he says, just be you, just bring you to it. So I'm like, all right, cool. How we greet each other. So that goes on for a couple hours. Don't think nothing of it. Get back on the train, go back to Philly, and I was waiting tables at Houlihan's on City Line Avenue. And I took that day off to go up there. Thank God I did. And so maybe like a year later, he calls and he's, yo, man, I had it in this short. I had my short in this film festival. Some advertising cats seen it from Budweiser, and they want to turn it into a commercial. I'm like, oh, snap. All right. But you still don't know what that is. So I'm like, all right, cool. That'd be cool. Shoot something. He's like, yeah, but you got to audition. So I was like, wait a minute, I got to audition to play me because they want to make it, they want to see the vibe with people and all that. So we go up to New York, and I happened to get to the audition the same time Paul did. So we in there, and it was like a room. It was multicultural. It was white, black, Indian, Latino, everybody. And so where the audition was, you can hear the other people behind the wall. So we sitting there, and you can hear people trying to read because it said it was like spelled out WHAZSSSSUP. So they're trying to give their interpretation of how that sounds, and it's not like us because we had our own thing. So we laughing at, you hit them. So we go in and we do our thing, and I guess when it was all the auditions was over, pretty much the advertising guys was like, "Yo, what are we doing? Like, why are we trying to put this thing together when the essence of it is not about race, it's about friendship, and it's about a feeling, and you get that feeling from these guys because they're genuine. So let's just go with the guys." And that's how that came to be, and then it just took off from there. Yeah.
Well, no, that's a beautiful thing. The thing is that ultimately Buttamilk is a Philly story. Mm-hmm. And so there are also tributaries from the main river of what Buttermilk was and what Buttermilk became that also branched out into huge success for other people. So I just wanted to make sure that we had that on record. There's a connectivity in terms of the friendship and how friendship can bring unexpected beauty into the world and delight people all around the globe. That's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, and just to add to the comedy thing, cats like who used to do some of the Buttermilk comedy jams that I had met on the circuit was like Michael Blackston, Teray. Anytime I see Mike, it's all love, but that's how we met. Back on the comedy circuit, the peanut butter comedy jams, like, yo, yeah.
Mark, we want to get you in this, and one of the reasons why we wanted to have you two on a call is because you all are both West Coast now. And I know that has not always been the case, of course, because to be part of this Buttermilk family, it had to be a Philly thing. So, Mark, take us back to what kind of drew you in to eventually be part of the Butterfinger, the publication that came out of Buttermilk. Take us back to some beginning.
I guess Buttermilk was something. And back in the, 93, 94, Philly, it was poetry every night, Philly somewhere. The Art Bank, what's the art? October Gallery, it was just popping up everywhere. And I guess Butterfinger was another thing. So when I went, and I don't remember where it was the first time I went, I don't know. But I remember connecting and talking to this lady, Selena. And I guess she was talking to somebody about doing a literary magazine. And that just sounded really interesting. And Gene was just like, let us do it. I didn't really have any format as far as I remember. Selena was more so like the editor. I don't even know if she ever wrote anything for it, but she just was like the editor and she had the format and stuff. And I guess I think she had the computer too. And I was writing short stories then, and so it just worked out. And I remember we'd be over at Selena's house like all day on a Sunday, like all day. And I remember Gene coming and like falling asleep, and we would cook food and all this stuff. But yeah, man, it was fun. And I remember the Buttermilk, the actual events it was just like a perfect like music and poetry, and then everybody was cool. And I remember Jill doing like those erotic poems all the time, which was fun. But I remember they had it at this place in North Philly, 26 and something was a restaurant.
North Star Bar, man.
North Star Bar. And Fred got up there and did this whole poetry thing with the menu. Yep.
I just mentioned that.
He took the menu and I said, okay, I realized we said salt and pepper. I saw this dude reading the menu, man. So that was cool. And then there was just so many people coming through. Like you said, Rich was there. Like you said, so many people that went on to do other big things. Jill, Rich, Trapita, on and on. Matter of fact, there was this dude there that night, this guy named Jeff X. And I didn't know who he was, but I remember the first time he was on a Roots album, and Black Thought was talking about Jeff X. And I said, oh, I know that dude. He got up there and did some Nubian Queen stuff. That was always the thing. Nubian Queen and King and all that stuff. But yeah, man, it was just such a great time to be in Philly and just be creative, man. And the Buttermilk was a big part of it. It was every time you just go out, you never know what you're going to hear. I know like these twins from Delaware. They were like the poet laureates of Delaware. There was just so many people coming through, man. I wish I had stayed. I didn't say I wish I had stayed, but when I left, it was still just jumping so much. And I left before Black Lily.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, just was so much good stuff going on there. And
let's back up a little bit, because you talked about the fact that you have been doing some writing. So did you always, like from a little dude, did you always claim that title that you were a writer?
I did poetry back in the day when they used to have like creative arts in class. So I went to Gompers in Winfield, and both of my teachers, we wrote poetry all the time, and I took to it. So I always wrote it. And then, matter of fact, when I got back into it, I lived in DC for a minute in the early 90s. When I came back to Philly in 91, Major Jackson, and what's the lawyer that was the guy that's
one dude.
They had this thing downtown with the Last Poets. And when I went to that and they all performed, I said, oh, I'm back and I got to find these poetry spots. But yeah, so then I went to, what's the one where Warren and Arpeggio were? Mm-hmm. What was the restaurant? Black with the Biner Brothers, the first one. Yeah, yep, that's the first place I performed. Yeah. Oh, no. With Jill, matter of fact, Jill performed the first night I performed with Arpeggio. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was just live, man, back then. It was a good time. Yeah.
And I was like, oh, there's gatekeepers who's not gonna let you hear this. There's certain things that just never gonna get to our ears. We gotta wait on radio to play it. And I just remember like hitting out record shops and I started DJing. King Brent was working at Tower Records on South Street.
Yep. Yeah.
I actually bought the record, Hot Through the House Joint.
Soho.
I bought that from Tower Records from King Brett. I'm just giving this whole monologue and soliloquy because where I went with the music and the tapes, it had an origin. And it started out with just love of music in general, but then it got impacted by me realizing that, oh, there's a business decision being made about some music, and some of this music is not getting us. And I'm just thinking, I don't know if it's just me, but this sounds like it's good enough. It's just as good. It could be right there on the radio with everything else, but it ain't nowhere to be found except maybe something like WKD, something like that.
Yeah.
I think Temple, somebody had a show on Temple too.
Oh yeah.
Who did for a minute?
Who was that?
I said Tiffany Bacon did for a minute.
Tiffany Bacon, yeah.
Lady B was on HAT?
WHAT.
And I remember on HAT they had Jazzy Jeff DJ.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Recorded some of that. AM radio just straight up.
That's all we had was Lady B for hip hop at one time. 4 hours on Sunday. That was it.
I remember when Lady B did her single in 1979 at the Nile Swim Club before Rapper's Delight.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That's good. It came out before Rapper's Delight.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, she was with
now that's some Philly history.
She was with Disco Rat.
You
remember Disco Rat had a big UPS truck with Disco Rat on the side. That's before hip hop.
That's right, dude.
For hip hop, yeah.
Crazy. You're right about that.
Disco Rat. Because he was before Cosby, he was before B-Force and Grandmaster Nell and all of them.
Yeah, all of them, yeah.
Grandmasters of Funk, that was like in the 70s.
Oh my goodness.
Before Bobby Dance.
Bobby Dance.
Bobby Dance.
Yeah. Let's stay here for a second very specifically, because Philadelphia of your childhood, it's important to establish Philadelphia as a character pre-Buttermilk for people to really understand the significance of the movement when it happened. So, Mark, talk about that, the room for Philly and our Black expression in the 70s. Let's leave it there, and maybe how it was influenced even before that, because everything has been so corporatized now that I don't think people have a real strong understanding of what it was like to have a KDU and to have an HAT in the midst of the way that we conceptualize radio now.
There really could be. I'm a history dude. I love history and I remember stuff. But as far as hip hop goes, you started right before Rapper's Delight. We were right there with getting the tapes from New York and everything, and having the DJs. And Philly was known for the DJs. We were known with Cash. My boy, I was in the crew with Cash Money for 3 years. And then going to Wagner's Ballroom and seeing Grandmaster Nell and being up at the Plateau and all that stuff. And that just goes back to Philly with the music, like Philly International, a lot of stuff. Philly's history is tied into a lot of the same people. There's a really good book called Black Brothers Incorporated, which is about the Black Mafia. And everything shoots off from there, from like music, politics, everything. A lot of that stuff was connected. Punchies on 52nd Street, all that stuff. Mr. Silks, all that's connected to everything. Everything's connected. And from there, when it got into rap, and Lady B, and all the different B-Force, and what was dude's name? Victor Duplay. He was Grandmaster Vic. I saw him at
Grandmaster Vic. Yeah, Grandmaster
52nd Street Y. I saw him at Devastating Don and other guys. Yeah, so I mean, it's Philly and music, but back to the doo-wop and all that stuff. It's all connected. And even connected to politics. Politics, music, everything's connected. Because Philly's really not that, I mean, it's big, but it's not that big.
Nope.
Yeah. And if you're in a creative space and you Black, you pretty much, it's 1 degree of separation, maybe. One, 2 at the most.
Right.
Fully agreed.
Yeah. So I would love to do like a Buttermilk reunion or just a poetry, some kind of big creative reunion with everybody. Because I remember King Britt was in Silk City, just the bank and all that stuff. I remember there was some other spot on Chestnut Street. Yeah. I remember I used to hang out with Gene and Renee when they were at Temple. Yeah. And they sang on Summertime.
They sang that?
Yeah, they sang on Summertime. And I remember them, the first time I saw Gene was at a Temple, Gene and Renee at a Temple talent show, like 1991. Yeah, they performed and they were singing like Blue, Afro Blue. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's just so many connections there with so many people. And it's all tied together. Even with I was an intern for E. Stephen Collins at DAS.
Wow.
I was on the stage at Unity Day in 86, I think. Lakeside was performing, so I was on stage. Yeah, with Lakeside, it was a bunch of people. I was all up in the trailers and stuff. I saw some stuff I shouldn't have seen. Yeah, man, I was at Unity Day, all that stuff. Worked for E. Stephen Collins. He came down to, matter of fact, he did an event at the Virginia Beach Party. He had a step show. There's just so much history there, man.
That was Minority Media Associates. He had the side hustle, which wasn't really a side hustle. It was like a whole small business. Mm-hmm. Mark, I'm curious about your insights, if it's revealed to you that basically me and Kenny met in E. Stephen Collins' office as interns at the same time. Mm-hmm. Gene was in the studio with Patty Jackson. He was basically Patty's intern. Wow. But I'm wondering, with you knowing that, right? Because obviously we were up in there as interns, like not talking about Buttermilk for, I want to say summer 90, 91.
I was 87.
Summers at DAS.
Yeah, so, I was 87.
So you were right before us, a couple of years before us.
Yeah. My step-pop actually got me. He was using this group called Concerned Black Men that E. Stephen Collins was in. Yes. That's how he got me in.
is he's the glue. Like he's the stitching, really. Yeah. And ultimately, the Buttamilk event that we had on the Parkway at Unity Day, we posed that to E. I think we weren't even interning anymore. That was like the summer after we'd finished being interns and we were working jobs and whatever else. But the same if E took you in, you was fam for life, pretty much.
He's still Philly. He was still Philly.
Oh no, 100%. Yeah. But wasn't there Super Sunday before Unity Day? There was a thing called
Super Sunday. Years
on the Parkway.
On the Parkway. Yep. Before Unity Day. Yep.
Before Unity Day. Yeah.
It's interesting connections.
Yeah. We used to do poetry at remember they opened the Clef Club and then they had they were doing the Arts Bank for a while. I remember me, Rich, and this other dude, what's his name? Sabella?
Sabella.
What's the best out there with y'all?
Sabella's out here.
I saw him one time. Yeah.
I saw him a couple times. I saw him right before COVID because I think the Roots had one of their Grammy party things out here and he was out here. I seen him at that.
He's a dance instructor at USC.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Oh wow. Yep. I haven't. Me, Rich, and Sabella were a group called Captive Soul for like half an hour one time. Performed one time at the Arts Bank, and that was it. Yeah.
Did y'all do poetry or?
We did one poem. It was epic too. We did this thing about how McDonald's was stealing black culture because they used to have this commercial where they had these little African figures, giraffes, and all this stuff with kente cloth. And we did this whole poem about how American culture would just steal black culture and African culture. It was dope too. I wish somebody recorded it. We got like a 5-minute standing ovation. But yeah, we was in a group together. I remember when Jill blew up. No, when I first got to LA, I heard her single on this guy. What's the guy's name? It's the guy out here on a public KCRW had a show called Black Chocolate something, and he played Jill's single before it was even anything. And I was like, oh, I didn't even know Jill. I knew she sang. Mm-hmm. When I heard it, I was like, Jill Scott. I said, there only could be one. And
from Philly, right?
Yeah. And she came and called me and left me a message on my answer machine. And I could never catch up. Yeah, that was a long time.
I think we're good, Marv. I don't know if you had anything else that you wanted to ask.
No, I'm feeling good. It's great seeing you gentlemen.
Yeah.
And,
anytime. Give a holler, man. Anytime. Yeah. I'm about to go in the archives. I'm about to go back.
He got them all. That's how you know that's love. Still in the original sleeves.
I know.
That's special.
I touch every last one of them. That's the thing. Like, I never had any of them mass produced. That was me with a sticker.
Right. That's old school.
Assembly line.
Old school.
Every last one, CD, cassette. Hey, just as we're doing this, because this is year 30, 94 was the first Buttamilk. And this started out because I actually have that audio footage from the poetry sessions. And we got Rich, got Jill early on. I ain't just want to put it out. Check it out. This was Buttamilk back then. Mm-hmm. So now it'll be that plus hearing from everybody that made Buttamilk and everybody that was part of it, every brick in the building. So back in the day, my brain was like, what am I gonna mix? How I'm gonna mix this? How I'm gonna mix this? How I'm gonna mix this? So I may or may not have thanked you all. I should be looking at this camera. Thank you both for what you did for Buttamilk. Thank you both. I get to say that. It's on record. It's face-to-face 2024 style because I think I was too preoccupied back then to thank you. Never made it to peanut butter and comedy, but now you know why, the truth behind that. And then even just paging through this again, that
was groundbreaking, man.
It was love because it's volunteer energy. It's like everything we hoped was real, where people contributed to what our vision was, which was basically just Black folk being beautiful, doing beautiful, and blazing trails. Because I do think a lot of us who were like in our 20-somethings in the 90s, we were born late 60s, early 70s into a country that was like, okay, you Black people, you see what you got. And we were the children, first children, really. And I think that was infused in what we were doing, community and entertainment. I think nowadays Buttamilk could restart as a pure entertainment concept. Versus no community at all, just like money grab, brand, whatever. But we weren't even thinking about any of that. We were just really trying to be a continuum in community gathering, and from what comes from that gathering, we're all for it, because it just meant somebody stepped forward, somebody kept going, somebody created an opportunity for themselves and maybe others. So y'all were part of that. So thank you very much.
Appreciate it. And that's how I met you. That's extra love right there. See, absolutely, web of love.
It's funny. I remember specifically. One of the events is somebody. All right, thanks so much. Said, love you. People said, "No, this is real." They said, "Buttermilk is a vibe," and it really was a vibe.
Yeah,
it was like you didn't have to say anything. Like everybody was there for the same reason. It wasn't about being seen. Wasn't nobody flossing. Like we were here to hear this creative stuff, and it was just cool. Especially in Philly then, because Philly was off the hook then.
Yeah,
crack had just jumped off. It was wild, man. But yeah, Buttermilk was definitely a safe space.
Yep.
We appreciate you saying that, and we feel the same way. So if it translated out to everybody who was a part of it, then that is a bonus all the way around. So we thank you for your time.
We were lucky to be part of it.
And we are thankful.
Especially you get old, you realize all this stuff. Yeah.
Right.
How about that?
For real.
I'm glad that we're all here to be able to see each other's faces and reminisce in this way, because that is not promised for sure.
Not at all.
So.
I like how you ended with, we were lucky to be a part of it. It's a significant reflection. To be able to look back at something and not in that hindsight is 2020 way where you're like, oh, I should have been smarter. Sometimes you get to look back on things and just be happy you were there.
Yes, yes. And also to be able to smile at the person that you were when you were there in that moment, because we're all growner and doing our thing. But to hear yourself and to reflect on who you were in that moment of development and growth makes you appreciate the journey more.
It certainly does. Certainly does. Mark said Buttermilk was a vibe. Right? And he said it. We're lucky to be there. We have a few more voices of people who might feel the same way. And a couple of these people never left their seats.
Right.
They were just in the audience.
Yeah. So next up, we have Chaitana, along with Bernard and another Lisa, but just contributing to more of that Buttermilk vibe.
I am Chaitana, and I was born and raised in the area. Right outside Philly at Lankenau. I was born. My parents were living in Burma at the time. They emigrated from India, from South India. And so I was raised, they were very much presenting and amplifying cultural understanding of, across cultures. That was important to them. Whether it was jazz music or Bharatanatyam, classical Indian dance or classical folk dance, or they spent a lot of time in International House in Philadelphia. I grew up there. And so between my mother's artsiness as a radio singer in India on All India Radio and my father's engineering vocation and artistic avocation, I was got a lot of that. But coming to the poetry readings at North Star Bar, on Poplar Street, hearing Jill was the first poet I heard, actually, on the Buttamilk stage. It blew me away. I was completely brought back to that artistic world that the sort of university scientific, because of my dad's background, was fighting for me. And so I was like, wait, no, I want to be over here. And then they were saying, no, I want you to be I was totally brought back to that artistic world. It was a beautiful education for me, a beautiful way to understand my identity as a person of color. And it was like a relearning, it was a reintegrating. It was just amazing. It was very inspiring. And I wrote a couple poems that literally fell off the pen, like 5 minutes each, because I'd been listening. And I was welcome to read those too, I think. It was like, and there was love for that, for what I was growing in, what I was rediscovering, it was just a beautiful thing. Now I just take all of the things that had the impetus and developed and grounded during those Buttamilk years, and I bring that into my role as a film curator for Philadelphia Asian American Film Festival. Mm-hmm. And also, we all know it's not just about literally, there's so many issues, being a person of color, but also class issue, caste. You know, the book tells us, like this wonderful, amazing author who did this wonderful service for all of us by writing that book. Yeah, this is stuff that I'm very aware of and able to bring to my role as a curator, because it's not always obvious. It's not always obvious to, say, other Asian identities, what caste is, how it manifests, for example, right, in a film, or how anti-Black racism manifests in a film. Mm-hmm. And I can be like, oh no, wait a second, hold on. We're not going to do this. We're not taking this film in this fashion, in this form, because it's one thing to write about racism or show that, I mean, because it's real, but it's another thing when there's no interrogation of that. Mm-hmm. There's no interrogation of casteism, or there's no interrogation of racism. We're not going to do that. We're not going to give that like a voice unless it's interrogated. So,
first of all, I love both you. It's Bernard Collins Jr. And I am a painter as well as a poet. I teach visual arts and I practice visual arts and performance. And I've been at it for a while now, for a long while now. And that's how I express myself. I'm proud to be part of the family. And yeah, I just love it. I love it. I'm proud of the coming through that sort of scene.
Let's stay there for a second. How did you first encounter Buttamilk? Tell the people. I
roamed the countryside like Kane from Kung Fu, when he used to just drizzle a little bit of ginseng in some water and just walk around and I just roamed looking for creative expression in Philadelphia.
Allow me to be more specific. Tell us a little bit about your background with the beatniks.
Yes. Taj and River, Marquita. All right, okay. We all got together and we did a project with Greg Osby called the Black Book Album. And in doing so, I'd already known Taj and River from our own creative circles prior to that. Mm-hmm. But that sort of gave me a little bit more of a nudge to push the poetry a little further. Because prior to that, I'd been an MC. Mm-hmm. Like, I considered myself an MC, and that was the passion. But I always was in love with the words. And then I found that in Philadelphia, there was this beautiful circle of poets. And that's how we first met. Because we were doing radio, when I first met you, we were doing a radio show. And I said, who are these pretty people here speaking all these words? And my first thing was, can I hang? Mm-hmm. And I found out that I found out not only could I hang, I found out that I had a family. Mm-hmm. I had a circle I really felt I belonged a part of. And along that journey, I met great people like Gene Robeson and many others. And Chasna, of course, and yourself. And I found that like Buttamilk gave us a chance to express ourselves. And the beautiful thing was we were all creative people with a passion, but not with a carrot dangling over our head. I think a lot of times people come out and they want to express themselves, but they're edged on by like this trophy, or it wasn't competitive. it was just beautiful people coming together to do beautiful things. And for many of us, it continued. It just continued, it escalated. Look how far Jill took it. And I say her specifically, and I said, because she's people. To me, forever, she's people. She's one of us. Hollywood, Grammy, award, doesn't matter. We're all like in that same tribe together.
Thank you for the opportunity, the invitation. And my name is Lisa Nelson Haynes. During the Buttamilk time, I was just Lisa Nelson. And I'm here in Philly, been in Philly, just left to go to school and came back. But what I am and what I've always been about and what attracted me to Buttamilk always was storytelling. And that's the through line for all that I do, usually first person narrative work. And just in a space, I think what I caught the tail end of what Bernard was saying was the space and what it evoked. And it was really a space of camaraderie, fellowship, just a space that you can go into. And it was like, shoulders drop as soon as you came in. And so, yeah, that's who I am and what I do. All right.
So for everybody, just so you fully understand, what Marv has decided to do is that this is now 2024, which will mark the 30th anniversary of Buttamilk having the opportunity to curate the spoken word tent at Unity Day, 1994, which was the first formal presentation of Buttamilk, what it meant, what it aspired to be to the world.
Wow.
And so we want to use the occasion of the 30th anniversary to release this limited series podcast that gives people who came along in maybe the second or third wave of this idea of Philadelphia spoken word and artistic expression a chance to learn about, for many people, this history. Because if people came in the Black Lily era, for instance, we are determined to make sure that Buttamilk stakes its claim on this history in terms of what it was able to do in the time that it did it. So that it is preserved. And so that's why we have been reaching out to the founders and share their perspective. We have reached out to some of the folks who edited the Butterfinger newsletter and all these different things. But we want to make sure that we are covering the bases of all of you. And we have all of you in photos related to Buttamilk events and what have you. So Chaston, I'm going back to you for a second. Brown girl in this very Black forward kind of artistic space. What compelled you not just to pick up your pen and write as a part of this, but also to share? What about the environment compelled you to join it, not just be a spectator of it?
Wow. Because I hearing so many sisters in particular talking about their feelings and talking about ways that they'd been marginalized, and was like, I needed to express my allyship in whatever way I could, and my identification of my acknowledgement of my oneness, but also where whatever else, all the other shit, you know, let me just say, I'm here. My heart is here. I'm with you. This is where my experiences are similar and the same. Here's where they might not be, but even if they aren't, where they aren't.
What was it about the kind of spoken word vibe that was happening in Philly that began to draw you out to be in the space and then eventually share your own pieces as well?
Stephanie, you keep saying I don't remember sharing anything. I was talking to somebody about that, but you said I did. So maybe I did.
Journal.
Okay, maybe exactly.
Charm thing. Yeah,
not all just me. Right, exactly. And check this out. remember, I'm older than a lot of you guys are. I'm older. And
not by much.
Not by much, but still, I was enthralled by the energy. I'm serious, just the energy. I've been very fortunate to have jobs that afforded me the opportunity to engage with artists, all different types of artists. And one of the things about Philly that I really do appreciate, I can't speak about other places, is, I'm not saying that people don't get into beefs and stuff like that, but for the most part, whatever the discipline, people are very supportive of each other. And I'm telling you, I'm missing that now. It's not because I don't think that it happens. I just think because of all of the energy in the world, period, overshadows that level of fellowship and camaraderie and support. Like, you shine, I shine.
Right.
Nobody's wanting to see somebody felt like I need to pick you. It was all there in that space. I also just want to take a moment, because I didn't know its affiliation with the anniversary with Unity Day. And I want to lift up the name of E. Stephen Collins.
Absolutely.
Because E is the one who said Buttermilk needs to be in this space. And we lost E years ago, but he needs to be named, and he ensured that we were not seen as tokens and some marginalized audience that needs to know at the forefront.
Mm-hmm.
So in having this conversation and moment of reflection, that really needs to be acknowledged. And I really want to applaud the intention of this initiative to give us that time and space to do that. Because I don't want us ever to forget those folks that ensured that the artistry, the beauty of what was happening was then brought to a larger audience. It took a lot of people to make that happen.
And just so you know, we originally were thinking that this was going to be 4 episodes. We might have a separate one just as a postscript love note to E. Stephen Collins, because his name has come up in every single conversation. So it is clear, and it was clear at the beginning because the Brothers of Buttermilk met interning at DAS.
Right.
So they each have their own testimony about that, but other people who are auxiliary to this also have the same story about however they encountered him, how he lifted them up and pointed them in the right direction of their lives. With Buttermilk.
Exactly.
So
because I started there too. I started at DAS with E2, and a lot of what I carry with me comes from what I learned during my time at DAS, whether it was with E. Stephen Collins or with Cody Anderson. They embodied what this looks like, what this means. When you're able to go behind you and lift other people up and move it forward. Yeah, it's a very strong legacy. So I want to just add that because, what the Young Brothers started and what grew from that is magical.
Yeah.
Ain't nothing but magical.
Yeah. Fully agree. And so, Bernard, using that as a backdrop, I want to come to you and specifically talk about that Unity Day stage. Because we have the documentation of all the people who were involved with it. I got connected to Buttermilk specifically because of that effort. And Carl was the person who introduced me to Gene. So that's how I came to be involved with that. But on that stage that day were the Beatniks, which included you, me, Jill, as a part of Clark and Scott, Trapita, Ursula, Wadude, and that was the core. That's who was on that stage. And now, as you talked about this whole kind of blooming into family, that was really a foundation. Rich, it was the core of what we now, when we think back to spoken word in the city, that's where the family really took root. October Gallery and Buttermilk. So,
and the Painted Bride. And we can't forget the Painted Bride.
Yes.
The Painted Bride. Oh my God. It's mind-blowing how many talented people. And Lisa, thank you so much for all the love you've shown and support you've shown. One of my favorite things was to come there and see your face and know that you were an anchor holding it in place when I would come there, because I knew the Painted Bride was in good hands. Philadelphia is interesting. When I look at this spoken, I see people now, it's like you missed out on so much, I feel. Hard to explain how much of a vibe, how much of a culture that was cultivated throughout the 90s era. You know what I mean? And it was one specific pocket of time when we all came together. We're all like around, for me, finishing college and stuff. And then we started to find out there's this really vibrant, creative space. October Gallery. You know what? I still remember Jill coming to October Gallery in her pajamas to do poetry. That was that sort of thing, like that started in the 90s. It was very interesting.
You and Lisa both are South Philly kids, right? So talk about Philadelphia, you both. Talk about Philadelphia as an animal. Tristan has already expressed a little bit about coming from the suburbs a bit and what that experience was like and how this became a home. But South Philly is legendary in terms of being a cultural hub for the city. We talk about West Philly a lot, and that's true. But South Philly is its own magic, its own history. So I want to hear a little bit about that from both of you.
You know what? Currently, I work at Fleischer Art Memorial. I teach classes at Fleischer Art Memorial to adults. And that institution has been around since the 1800s. And it's still going strong. 9th Street was a cultural kind of place. We knew to go, that we could go. We could get our food. We could do all that stuff from 9th Street. But it was also like South Street. All these things were like part of our culture. Although Black South Philly didn't get that much talk about. They didn't talk a lot about Black South Philly. But we always knew it was there. It was a beautiful place to come up.
That's what I want to say. I don't think that you can talk about South Philly and what it fostered without talking about Lois Hernandez and Adunde.
Yep.
Yes.
Not only about location, okay, but let's talk about acts of resistance as gentrification's coming in and saying this will not be moved. This will not be moved. And how that legacy has continued with Boomy. Okay. So yes, we had the main stage at Adunde, but you could go to every corner and find some type of expression happening. You're talking about a continual, consistent, almost, like I said, active resistance of we here and we ain't gonna be moved, and we're gonna do what we do the way we do it. If it's just this one day a year, it's happening here. There's an apartment on South 19th Street between Fitzwater and Bainbridge. Okay, people living there now. My mother knew it as Club and Costa. It was an after-hours spot. Performers coming from Broad Street, the Black performers that didn't have other places to go, would go down there and get their fish sandwiches and get their drinks after their performances.
Nice.
That's where my mother was introduced to Billie Holiday by her father.
Yeah.
Okay, can you understand what the spirits are in that apartment? Somebody thinking they just live in some gentrified, beautiful space. In the meantime, the likes of Billie Holiday, okay? My mom said the Hines brothers, everybody had been at some point down there. That was the space to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, there's a lot around there. What's the club there that on what is that? On South Street that's down there? The Royal Theater.
The Royal Theater, is absolutely.
The Royal Theater. Yeah. It's just so much rich history there.
Yeah.
And when you talk about more modern things, more today things, if you read Black Thought's new book, and he talks about his mother making sure that he got to Fleischer.
They just
talks about how what that experience opened up for him.
And I wanted to share this. I used to be able to walk from one great grandmother's house to the next within 15 minutes.
I love that.
And my grandmother on both sides of the family. They were all in South Philly. They did not move. And it was just interesting. That's how South Philly is its own insular kind of cultural kind of thing. It is very interesting how it divides along the color lines. You knew that the Irish people were over here, the Italian people were
over there,
the Black people are over here. It was very, and it was always these divided neighborhoods, but you always got a feeling of it feeling like home. It's always been a beautiful place to be at. There's something beautiful there.
If you had to sum up in a few sentences what you hope the legacy is that Buttamilk can impart on a new generation, what do you want people to know about your experience?
Yes, this is where the Sugar Hill Gang of Philly, that's the legacy, the intellectuals of Philadelphia who were very involved in social work.
Yes.
That's something I really related with, noticed, and that's why it was home. And
I love that. The Sugar Hill Gang of social work. I am quoting you on that.
Yes.
Sure, because that I don't think I have ever heard that expressed that concisely. That is absolutely true.
I was working at Elwyn at the time, and this was also like a Renaissance time. And so this is where there's been so many accomplishments, the art is what inspired us. It was also, the point was that Black community is going to direct and talk about this, put this on the table and solve this. We're not going to have colonization coming in and figuring this out for us or tell us how it has to be.
I wonder if we knew that at the time. I wonder if we knew that's what was happening, that the absence of white colonization in that space. Did we know that? Did we have the language to name that at the time?
I heard a lot of poets doing that.
I heard it, but I'm saying in the active of this space. Nobody said you're not welcome. Nobody said that. But we were protective of.
Yes.
And it became very clear that this is what. So I think that there's something there, and sometimes you don't even know in the moment the power of it. And that's another reason why this opportunity for reflection is so important.
Yeah.
It's because now we're bringing another lens to it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it makes it that much more just revolutionary. I keep coming back to that word.
Yeah. Right. Marian Anderson was my mom's favorite singer. Like, she really looked up to her. My mother was a singer. She loved Marian Anderson. So being part of this group brought me to where I belonged, where it was like always supposed to be. It recalibrated some of the things that should have been in the first place. I learned through being part of these circles, through being a poet, that my great aunt on my mom's side she traveled with her husband. They didn't have kids. She traveled with her husband to Alabama, and her husband was a geologist. He was like there for a hoity-toity conference. She's listened. She had her sari on and she went and marched in the bus boycotts. I had no idea. It's a story that came out directly because of my involvement in Buttamilk, in October Gallery, just as a poet with you guys. That's the only reason it came up in discussion. This was
But it's wonderful to hear that Buttamilk gave you access to ask the questions, for the storytelling to come back to you. Right, as people are taking in the podcast, they're learning this history, or it's reawakening. And then what do you think they should know about the Buttamilk experience?
I just think that it's a huge experiment in agency of those three brothers saying, this is what we're going to do. Agency in the people that decided to get up and share. Mm-hmm. Agency in the relationships that were created through the space that they, right? Yes. I want and I hope to foster in young people their own sense of agency in what they dream, what they imagine. And so that's really what I hope that people take away from their buttermilk experience, how they exercised agency.
Amen. Thank you.
Yes. Steph, this is absolutely beautiful. It's so powerful. It's so wonderful to walk back through and think about those experiences at Buttermilk.
So October Gallery was the purest form of poetry reading. When Marv says that he wants to make sure that Buttermilk is recognized for being a pioneer, it's because October Gallery was pure poetry. Arpeggio and Po Jazz was live jazz and the readings. Yeah. Buttermilk was the poetry and DJ and more of, and what came after that, because Blue Funk came immediately after that. And there are a lot of people, because they had splashier promotion, a lot of people see Blue Funk in the same capacity without knowing Buttermilk's history. So they don't understand that Blue Funk wouldn't have happened if Buttermilk didn't happen. That he understands they weren't the first and only game in town. But the real idea is for people to say, even if you went to all of the other venues, right? Buttermilk was not necessarily a bubble, but it was a well-defined community. Yeah. And people who came, there are people who showed up for every speakeasy and never read a poem, right? We have the photographic evidence that they would show up over and over again. And this idea is like, what was it about this that made you come every time somebody put out the call? So we're just really trying to paint a portrait for people who are completely unaware of Buttermilk's existence.
Yeah, and I think it was accessible and affordable. And you felt welcome to walk through the door and express yourself. It's important. I think that if you had poetry in your heart, you could express that poetry from your heart on that stage. And I always felt, because I've always been a little bit of an odd kind of person when it creatively, sometimes intentionally, but just in general. So it was nice to have a place where I could step up, be me, be myself, and feel I was able to express it and just let it just fly, let it flow. You know what I mean? Some places you feel a little bit, you walk in, you say, ooh, I feel like I'm underdressed. or I feel like I should have a PhD in poetry so that I might have permission from the elite to express myself in this way. What is am I doing the right rhyme scheme? What's our theme for tonight?
Well, I know I was always going back. I know that I saw pictures on Marv's Facebook page that he had dedicated. I know there's a picture of me and Kenya and Jill. I'm like, did I actually read at a Buttermilk event ever? Or was I always going to the Poplar Street, the North Star, and then had a little more courage to read at October because it was like a smaller space, a little. So I'm not even 100% sure, but I'm definitely one of those people who like showed up all the time because it's like, it was like, it had a following. You were like, wait a minute, this isn't enough. I want to go again. So there was another reading we could go to and see all our family again.
Yeah.
There's been other venues that have popped up, but I think the impact that came from Buttermilk, October Gallery, and the Painted Bride, I wanted to acknowledge that because I remember Kevin O'Neill and the twins had their Friday night series that they would do. And they would have Day of the Poet. And we would go ahead and we would do that. And that's once again a stage you felt comfortable enough to step up on because you planted your roots in the buttermilk soil.
Yeah.
As an undergraduate, I decided, I did all my education and I went to Temple, Tyler for undergrad. And I did poetry and spoken word and hip hop stuff during that time. I got introduced to jazz through like trial by fire. I found myself like meeting people like Greg, and then later on working with people like Khan Jamal. I did On This Night, and Sandra Turner Barnes, whose husband was Bootsy Barnes, right? And jazz started to become a part of it. And so it naturally followed when I went into my graduate studies. And being able to express on the stage, such as Buttermilk, it allowed me to explore the jazzy side of myself on an elevated stage and really like figure out like what my actual thoughts was about it. So I was able to push these ideas I've had. And it's actually influenced my visual art too, because I've started to, because it was impossible for it not to influence it. I did chapbooks, and the chapbooks would it would include visual arts, but it would also talk about the music that was like having infused into my soul and stuff like that. Before expressing it visually, I was able to express it verbally or simultaneously. Express it verbally and do it visually. But I like having that venue to do that. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's really, I could feel how it influenced my work. When I did a series called Poetic Playground at Fleischer, where I did 3 separate performances where I literally combined all those elements. I brought in DJ Razor Ramon, my good cousin and good friend, right? We're going on tour with Renee Harris right now. And we infused like turntablism and hip hop music with poetry and visual art. I had Ronan Ali come with his percussive stuff and his R&B vocals, and we combined visual art with and poetry and R&B music. I had Eddie Rosado, Latin percussionist. We did work where we took the Taino culture that he's so proud of, it's so beautiful, and we infused it with the poetry and the visual art. So it's an ongoing journey, and it just continues, and it's a beautiful thing. But I have to say that it was that soil, that rich, fertile soil, that places like Buttermilk and those experiences, like coming up in that soil, strengthened me to grow into the artist that I am, and the fruit is starting to manifest. Yeah.
Yes, indeed, Bernard Collins. When he says develop into the artist that he is becoming now, he's yet another example of someone multi-talented, came to Buttermilk to express himself poetically and got his degree, his undergraduate degree in art, and then went on to get his MFA in art. So he's a fine artist in addition to being a poet and all the other ways that he expresses himself creatively. So that nurturing energy, that vibe that people have been talking about has manifested itself, especially for him, in lots of ways.
Seed to flower, from seed to flower. It's just been amazing to be a part of these conversations, to recall Buttermilk. As we approach the end of episode 5, we're going to close out episode 5 with an interview with Ursula Rucker and Felicia Casher.
And the crazy thing about this one is, of all of the reminiscences and conversations that we had over the course of putting this podcast together, this was the one that got us all choked up. This is the one where we had to have a moment in this, because the spiritual nature of not only performing for people, but building this community was encapsulated so beautifully in the conversation between these two sisters and us. And I don't even want to give it too much more intro. I want people to feel it the way we did.
That's right. That's right. Without further ado,
let us take this moment to go back and recenter ourselves in 1994, 1995-ish. And Earth, I'm going to start with you because we shared the bill on what was one of Buttamilk's first kind of public coming together to let people know that this was a concept, this was a vibe that they were going to build, which was under the spoken word tent at Unity Day. And the reason why, and that's how I said, I had to, because I knew this was going to be a moment for you. In this period of your life, your first son was a baby. And you would often do performances with him and his little papoose on your chest, heartbeat to heartbeat. So this is the journey. This is part of the journey that we want you all to share with us about where you were then in this creative path of yours, especially as a new mom.
Yo, thanks, Steph. Wow, I'm trying to get out of the moment you just put me in. I was just talking about Unity Day to somebody last time. I'm like, remember Unity Day used to be so cool. And Super Sunday, we just had our loving community and family that was always growing and becoming in all different places. Thanks, y'all. Unbelievable. This should definitely be documented because, yeah, as Zora says, my famous re-quoting of Zora Neale Hurston, if you were silent about your pain, they will kill you and say you enjoyed it. So there are certain things we don't need to talk about ad nauseum, but things that haven't been talked about at all, or enough, or ad nauseum that should, like this. Like, I'll always be ready to celebrate Buttamilk in its own, and how I was there and always see myself there. I don't forget those moments at North Star, but I wasn't thinking about it. That's the thing. You know what I'm saying? If I was overthinking it, and you almost couldn't. I don't know how you all feel, but I feel like you almost couldn't overthink it. It was that energy. It's so magical. And here in this city, Philly, in our city, it's already magical. So,
absolutely, that performance, I think, was so needed and so profound for a lot of us, because it was the first time we had known each other in circles. We would show up at open mics at the same time, but that was the first time that we were all there showcased back to back for the thousands of people that came through that day. It was almost like a stadium performance, you know what I mean? Because there were so many people on the Parkway that didn't necessarily come to see us, but they saw the tent was there. And so there was this circulation of humanity happening around that. And the part of the reason why I also ask you about that, Ursula, is because it's not like that was the first time that your artistry had been elevated for a global audience, because that was after the Roots and that amazing piece that you did for that album. You know, I definitely think of it more in terms of this arc of life we're living, right? Instead of necessarily the performance aspect of it, because it's, as we all had basically agreed to use our art, to use our gifts, this was now where are the outlets where my gift is going to reach people.
First of all, my brain is exploding. I just want to let you know. I'm like, I have like a little tick going on. It's like, oh, shit. Thank you. Who else was on the bill at Unity?
The Beatniks, which was Marquita, Taj, and and Bernard, Wadu, Trapita, Clark and Scott, Jill and Tiffany when they were a duo. Was Brother Aki on that one, Marv?
Yes, Brother
Aki.
Aki! Was that before Aki was in the group Black Eyes? Because it was a group.
Yes, it was before that.
All right.
This was, we are now talking summer of 94.
Oh, then I was there. I remember that.
Yeah, summer of 94.
Yeah, on the Parkway. Yeah, you're right.
I know. So again, right? So we are talking about 30 years ago, Ursula. Just to keep that in focus. That's why this passage of time situation is real. So not for nothing. That was part of the journey for you. And Felicia, one of the things that we are very sensitive to is that now you represent a whole kindred spirit in your life that was a part of this journey with you, who is no longer with us on this plane. And Daughters of the Diaspora were connected directly to Brother Dewey. This idea of making you a part of the family and saying that these sisters need to be heard. They have something to say. They should be a part of this family. So talk about what you remember of that, deciding to form a group, right? Because there are a lot of poets out here doing it on their own, but this kindred energy, and then bringing that energy into the Buttamilk space.
Thank you so much. First, for inviting me to be a part of this, and I'm honoring Natanya Davide Stewart in the spirit realm right now. Give thanks. She's always with me now, always. Funny, you should ask, both Davide and I were from the Midwest. And her being from Indiana, I was from Nebraska. We met on campus. I had this big afro, and she was like, yo, I want to be your friend. And it just, I was like, and we became friends.
Not only can I hear her saying that, but I can see her saying that. Like, it's a period, that energy.
That's Dav all day. And that's how we ended up connecting. And through our friendship, we both loved poetry and were spoken word artists. And it was like, how do we move in this big city that we're both brand new to? So in my journey, I had met Baba Dewey and Mama Sharon. I ended up living with them, like renting from them, and then being immersed in their entire world. And part of the manifestation of being in that space was Buttamilk. So of course I was going, yo, like, Da, we have to do this. But let me back up really quick, because you said, how do we start? Da was already performing. I was performing. She had a group when she went to school in Minneapolis, and she went to Swarthmore, and she had a group. And then when she came here, she was like, yo, I really want to do this. And I love working together with other women, other Black women, and Daughters of the Diaspora gave birth. What we both realized is we both were in theater and poetry. And so it allowed for Daughters of the Diaspora to grow in a very theatrical way of performance. Mm-hmm. And then meeting and connecting, or rather attracting other sisters to the group. There ended up being 4. And that's how Daughters of the Diaspora was born. And then so getting to come to Buttamilk and perform and just be like, yo, we gonna walk out the audience and we about to, you gonna say this part and I'm gonna say this part. And we would rehearse for hours just for an open mic. But we wanted to make sure that we were making an impact, not only through words, but listen, like, we're not from here, but we about to represent. We want to speak truth to power and let people know we're everywhere, creating energy on the planet to change the trajectory of how we see and view things, and really hard hitting subjects. We had no problem talking about
women's reproductive systems. We had no problem talking about Black power. We had no problem talking about transforming from one space in your life to the next space. We had no problem talking about rape and domestic violence. So we would utilize these topics to disseminate information. And for that, I am just incredibly blessed. And it was also simultaneously a blessing to see everyone, Ursula, Stephanie, Jill, all of those beautiful people in that space who you may not have gotten an opportunity to see in such a vulnerable, organic, as you mentioned, Ursula, time period. It was just organic, right? It seemed like it was filled with love, support. That's what I felt. I'm like, there were
in a hard city.
Yeah, in a hard city, right?
In a city, listen, always put that down on everything, yo. In a city where it's hard to start shit. You don't know what people gonna like, care, ever. That's like historical.
Yeah. And for me, as you mentioned, it was hard. I always say Philadelphia kicked my ass. I was out there without any.
Kicked all our ass.
But being from a little small town, a little city, and then coming to Philly, like Buttermilk was a way for me to cope from isolation and loneliness and feel connected in family of like minds. It represented that, and so did Daughters. So for me to be a part of Daughters with Dov and to also be a part of this space that was minus ego, because over time in space, people grew, egos grew a little bit too with folks.
Poets.
And that's what happened. But in that space, I didn't feel that. And yes, poets, we can be egotistical. What E says,
we're emotional. What the hell? We can't.
We are.
We can't. You know.
We are. But I felt like that space was like, a virgin. You know what I mean? It was like you could just be free to express without people wondering how many times you perform or who you knew or.
And we used to pop that coochie every week. I'm sorry, you open the door.
It was a virgin space, and I loved that. I loved being a part of the seedlings growing in that space. And I'm also I feel very blessed that, and I know Dov feels the same way, that because of that space, there were other spaces that were created, right? And then there became a family of support systems and networks within that space that grew out of that space. And it was just beautiful. It just really was.
We could go on, like, how many more of these can we have?
It's not enough time. It's not, and I never said this, but why not just say, I don't know if this needs to make it to the end, but right before Buttermilk manifested, I went through a rape in Philly, not knowing nobody. And as we all know, that art is a form of healing, right? It allows you to change and transform your pain into something prolific. And so it meant a lot for me to have a safe space in order to share, because I was in that healing journey of my life, and not knowing anybody and not having my family here, and what the fuck just happened? Like, I just got here. So it was my spiritual hospital, an outlet for me to feel loved and connected to safe people.
Thank you for that. To gather myself, because hearing both of you speak, I've never said this, Stephanie. This would be like new information. This is being put together because it was a significant, short, but big little movement in Philly. And I was reflecting on to myself, Gene, Kenny, Dewey, and the phrase that came to mind was like, brothers with good mothers, right? But we go another step. We all, without saying it, were very pro-community before the phrase safe space existed. So my background, I was born in North Philly, then moved to West Philly at 1. I grew up in a house with my mom, her 4 sisters, my grandma, and then when my sister came along, so I got 7 women. Like, this is my norm, right? It's my norm. But 7 perspectives, right? I'm just in the house, and I'm so deeply and maybe subliminally or to my core, maybe down to the cells, I was extremely comfortable with, number one, the voice and the opinions of women. And I would never said these words back in 1994, but this was just me as a natural person. And one of the things that I got out of Buttamilk the most was the being able to provide a stage for self-expression, right? And for all the diverse topics within self-expression. And it was just, there it is. Now, do you, be you. And my selfish interest was, okay, I'm enriched, but the whole room is, because I'm one of those people who at the time, and probably still to this day, is just like, hey, come on, y'all. This is good for the soul. This is food for the soul. Come on. I'm one of those sort of idealistic, friendly people. And borderline corny.
Brilliant.
But Buttamilk was born out of a really almost idealistic just conception of people being creative under one roof, networking, like all these concepts that came after us, like after work hangouts and things like that. We were doing that without saying that's what we were doing, but that's what we intended to happen. So I just wanted to interject that, and I'm so thankful that you were part of it. So I wanted to say that too.
Thank you.
It has been a healing journey in so many ways. We have collectively, we have sung out, written out, performed out so much of the processing that we.
And there was comedy.
Yes.
Yes.
That was so unique to me because I'm like a comedy lover. Felicia, I'll be hitting you up. Me and Stephanie was I'm looking at Stephanie's face. I'm just saying, we don't let these things, you felt safe enough. It's a space that is a generous space. It's loving. We created things, the times, and shit going on in our own lives. I could go on. We could be on here forever. But anyway, you felt okay enough to say that. And I feel grateful for that. And we'll come back to that if you let us.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was going to say that's a separate conversation. And
I didn't do it to be like, bam, but that.
No, it's good. But we had, this is from the ancestor, whatever. This is what we do. This is what we learn to do. This is what we've learned to do. Being all together and doing this is what we've learned to do. Come on, Marv, you know how much I love Buttamilk. But I will always think the comedy is what also set it apart, that all these things were together in one. Yo, that shit is brilliant. Because we're such a funny town, such a gritty city, but man, we like comedy. We like some funny shit in Philly, and I'm definitely a fan of the comedic arts. It's such a special thing. So that you incorporated everything: comedy, camaraderie, poetry. At time where it was like, just you didn't know it's all experimentation and an extension of what our people we love, Sonia, Mary Baraka, but doing it our way. What was that? Like, we was all figuring it out, and you created a growing ground for this, and the music and DJ culture and live instruments. All of it was
Speaking of funny.
Yeah, excuse me.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Speaking of funny, I remember how Buttermilk was happening. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Slam had started to give birth.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was beginning to be a nuance. And you could always tell a Slam poet. Now, I'm not talking about Buttermilk per se, but I remember somebody.
But you just made me hiccup.
Listen, because Dom and I, we used to have these whole like conversations around like, all you got to do is say it like this and you're a Slam poet. And everybody became a poet. So Buttermilk for me was unique because, as Ursula mentioned, like people came with their unique talents and you stood in your own voice. You may have been influenced by some, you may have been influenced by the last poets, but it still for me felt very unique. And then Slam hit the scene and somebody at Buttermilk, I don't know who it was, maybe it was Baba Dewey, but they read the menu in that Slam tone. Does anybody remember that?
It was.
Yes.
Okay. And that was hilarious.
Yes. That might have been Omar Tyree.
Well, it was somebody.
We'll be talking to him later today.
And it was hilarious. And I was like, oh my goodness.
I want to hear it now.
It was, like that was her.
We were all learning. I think the thing that Felicia, when you were telling the story about Daughters of the Diet, and I love you. I love the whole energy. I picture y'all every time you said something, the image from the Painted Bride with y'all kept in the cafe. I don't know. I don't know. That was like, because I was there a lot. So then I started working there.
Yeah.
But that it's amazing no matter how any of us were going up. We didn't know. That's all. I know I didn't know. Whatever I knew, I was experimenting, and then I went to the next thing and the next thing and the next. But I always said, and I still think about it, like this lone wolf thing that was happening, that I would always feel with me. It wasn't anything that was intentional. I just always, but it became a great thing for me now in my life. It didn't keep me from, oh man, I'm like the freelance. I'm like, hey, I'm here, I'm there. I'm like, yes. You're like the chameleon. I'm like, I just get to be with the things that poetry has introduced all of us to, and the people and experiences and whatnot. But yeah, it's so interesting that some people had groups, and I was always with everyone. Sometimes I would get very sad for a long time until I realized me, whatever that is, still learning all the time, but I would have a lot of trouble throughout the years. Like, damn, maybe I should be able to, I don't know that, but I know you, but I don't know, but I should have met them by now. But what's going on? Like this kind of thing constantly, but yeah, then you see, oh, this is your course, and just stay your course rigidly, but be open on your course.
Yeah.
That's right.
I would say that Buttermilk.
And we're all poets and artists, and we all do it not for just like, we have fun when we perform and share and stuff, but all of us have this and things and intentions that whenever we're doing it, it's always in there. So this is a boost up for me today, because hey, look, as Felicia shared, we be dealing with some rough shit, and let's put it out more often as we make this art shit. We could say, hey, look, we got real lives, and we grown now too. Oh no, I'm not sitting at nobody's table and just, it's all shits and giggles. Let me just say one hard thing, and then we can move on.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
It's just because you never know who can help. If we're a community, we doing it collectively, then we doing it collectively.
Absolutely.
Pardon me.
And I'm so grateful to y'all for doing this.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. It was necessary, but clearly there are other reasons that it's necessary, even beside the subject.
We're going to need the Buttermilk Base support group.
Come on now.
It's not a joke. It's not a fucking joke.
Listen, I know that, like I said it with love. It was a part of my experience, but Buttermilk was a part of the healing salve in my life. And then what I experienced here, I went back home because I ended up moving back to Nebraska.
and I started a poetry open mic.
One of my favorite new things about Philly. Philly is as magical as I always thought it was. You just we don't understand it, but we're supposed to be here to. It's a magical place. It's not any other place like it. And that Buttermilk happened here, and anything that happens here, especially for us, mostly right, Black, brown, or indigenous type artists, and then take it one step further, poets. One of the weirdest of them all. And they're saying some real shit to help people. Oh, we want to help people. Why?
Yeah, because our words aren't for us. They're for other people.
And they put it to music. And it's still going on.
Yes.
Speaking of that, Ursula, in this journey of I'm trying to find my course and just do what's in my heart to do, you have now become an international recording artist doing poetry. Do you process that regularly? Is it still like surreal to you?
It's crazy because life be life, and you like, wait a minute, but I'm me. But hold on, let me solve this really fucking big ass problem. You're like, come on, that's most people, but for what we do when that shit's happening with us, it's why. And a mom of four and mommy, and I'm like, okay, I'll tell you this: my sons have always had a running joke with me when we used to be out. It still makes me laugh. We'd be out at a restaurant, whatever, somewhere at an event. Somebody would come up, and here go my sons. They clown me throughout the years. They'll start this routine with me. It comes out of nowhere. Are you? Is your name? And then they start, and I'm like, oh, get the fuck out. They like clown me because they had to go through it. And I'm like, now it's just like an ongoing, which I love. That's not a clown thing for me. Whoever, any of us, somebody comes up to you on your day, you're not sure you want to be in this day. And somebody comes up to you and they remind you of you because they came out of their whatever moment. They might not even talk to people like this and come and tell you, I don't never take nothing ever for granted. I don't even know. That phrase is not even applicable every time. I don't even, okay. I like, well, if you're going to start crying in front of me, then make sure I can cry with you.
Right.
That's right.
And I mean, in that same respect, if Felicia, for me, we talk about Jill's debut album, right? Jill called me when they were trying to figure out how to wrap up the album. Because we're hanging out. She had played stuff for me that they were testing out for the project or whatever else. And
was it on a cassette tape? I just have to say that. Was it?
Yes.
Because Dive got one too, and I had already moved back home, so Dive got one. It was on a cassette tape.
And so I made for Jill, as production was moving forward, I made a mixtape of Jill for Jill. Because I was like, you need to remember, as you are about to step into this new phase of your existence, you need to remember the journey. And then she called me and she was like, you know what? She was like, Jeff loved that shit. She was like, your voice is going to end up being on the album. This wasn't anything planned. It was nothing. This whole idea of the very first voice you hear on Jill's album is mine is crazy to me. But I also think about it with you because Daughters of the Diaspora got name checked in a song.
I saw that and then I went and looked at the credits and I said, maybe that was her way of bigging us up. Because I did. That was a point. I was like, oh my God, we in the song. Let's check the credits. My voice was like, let me check the credits. I said, that's our big up right there.
Oh, I love these stories. I love these stories. I'm a story, like Zora said, teller. I'm a big story. I love, we are story. I love our real stories, our actual stories, and the stories we tell with our poetry. I love stories. Can we have Buttermilk story hour 2 out here.
Come on now. I love this.
Listen, maybe that can be a part of when production is done and we're ready to begin sharing it with the world. There has to be an event around it. Let's think about bringing this stuff up. But I'm like, we can't talk about how this was a point in our lives and what it meant for us in our development if we can't also say that this is why these things happen. People need to be able to connect the dots with where you've heard people's names or experiences before.
Yes.
I saw Jill in Amsterdam when I was going just to meet the A&R guy from K7. Listen, let's not forget the shy and scary ass parts of all of this shit. Let's not write all that down. Everybody was scared shitless, and if they weren't, they was cockier than a motherfucker. Or they were they had some resolve. Because let me tell you, every time I was like, I'm gonna die before I get out there. Every single time backstage, it didn't matter. So I ran into Jill. She was just getting that album going, and I was over there to do a show. We were both performing at the same thing on the same night at Paradiso.
Wow.
2 Philly Johns.
Oh man.
Thank you, y'all. We don't even say nothing. We don't say nothing. We forgot our own shit. So I'm gonna. We went 30 years.
I'm glad that I'm here at this time. I'm so glad I took 11. Go ahead.
11 a.m. Me too. 11 a.m. is my favorite time. It is. And we shoe shopping. We in the shoes. I'm like, Jill, don't get those. Get them. She got new money. I said, No, listen to me. Get the other ones.
Look, Jill loves stiletto now.
We were just starting. We were together.
That's beautiful. What a beautiful testimony.
We were all of us. No matter what, let's continue to say that we were all together and we still all know each other.
Yeah.
Most of us still like each other. It's not whatever. It's Philly petty, divine petty. It just has to be in there just a little bit.
Yeah.
No, it's like the people who are unloving, they're not here.
Survey says.
That's it. The people that weren't, because this poetry is a culture. This is just like any other culture, hip hop, whatever. To me, it's the first culture. Nobody was doing no talking with nobody when everybody started talking on this planet. If there wasn't no poetry in it, we're the first. And we always be suffering and struggling and whatever. And we're going to change this. Everything we do should have that in it. That somehow there's some advocacy for us and things getting better for us. Fuck this. Yeah. All the rungs we have to climb. Come on, y'all. Y'all love this poetry now. Now you can't fool us. Yeah. Now you can't fool us on that. You love poetry. You love it. We didn't say we wanted to operate with all the finance and the currency and shit. You did so. Thus, give us the fucking resources. Because if there wasn't any poetry and without us, exciting us, things would be so.
I love that, Ursula. You know, my elder, I have a creative elder mama, and she always would remind me, especially when I moved back home, because I was home for 10 years this last time before I moved back. And
I was trying to get to Nebraska while you were there.
You were. It was real. I might be able to do it now, though. Back then, it was like, y'all don't have no money for, you know what I mean? What are we doing? Now there's money everywhere for everything. But back then it was so hard. I would have had to hustle to get people there. And I believe that
I know you tried.
Artists have to get paid. And my creative mama was like, because everybody always wants you to come. Can you come perform for this or come do this? And it was like, would you call if I called you at your job and asked you to do it for free, would you do it? And it's no. So why are you calling me and asking me to do it for free? This is how I make a living. This is a part of my life's journey. This is how
I'm gonna ask my next plumber. Bust a poem right here on the spot, yo. While you fixing this fucking pipe, bust a fucking freestyle.
I gotta big up Mama Deb for that one, because that's how she got me to be like, yo, like, people can't be asking you for free. That's a gift. It's a talent you're giving to other people, right? You're taking time.
And there are all kinds of resources that we can be open to. That's what I've learned along this way. So I always say money's means, ways and resources of any kind, whatever. If it's not actual, make it easy and shit.
Right.
If it's ease.
Yes.
And we have to eat.
Change. Yes.
And not worry about eating while we entertaining y'all.
Exactly.
Lift y'all spirits up and lay down in a fetal position when we go home.
Samantha Raheem Thornhill. Are you all familiar with her? She's another Samantha Raheem Thornhill.
Okay, I'll have to look her up.
She's another poet. She was in New York for a while, and I don't know whether she moved away and moved back or whether she's still away. But she was a part of the Eargasms crew, Brooklyn Moon crew, that I met when I was up there doing theater. But
with Hanifa.
Yeah, exactly. All that whole crew. And she wrote, we're friends on Facebook, and occasionally her posts will go across my feed. And this is recently, so it's been more recently since the beginning of the year. But she said her whatever number book is out now, and she was booking at colleges, universities. That's a good circuit. And she got a booking for some place and was stressing because she's also a relatively new mom. And so in addition to the I'm feeding myself, now we got the home and hearth considerations. And when she was negotiating or just talking through the contract or whatever else, they said to her, I think, something about childcare. Basically, do you want to bring the baby with you? And she was understand that she is so used to not having that she didn't even think to ask to see if it would be okay, if they would welcome her with who she is in this moment and her needs. And she was like, that changed it. She was like, universe, you have now shown me that this is not optional.
Absolutely.
Because I'm not trying to be away from my child. So if you want me, then we're going to have to make some provisions for me to bring my child.
Sure.
That's how this
When I
works
have
for
the
me.
panel, I want to invite her. But when I have the panel, which I always want to have a panel series, so I'm going to say it to Stephanie, so Stephanie can help. God, love panel. I've come to love panels, and I want to have forever and ever. I don't know why I haven't done this, but one of the first things I want to have is a panel of all the caregivers, parents, whatever, of young people that have had to go out here and do this and feel the guilt, still not be earning enough money, still don't know you got to keep doing it. If you don't keep doing it, you're not going to get out here. All the things people tell you, this and that. You just, oh man, you don't even know what you said at Unity Day. What I meant really was true. I didn't know what I was doing a lot of times. I did, but let me just do this. Let me leave the kids again. I would take their photos with me on the plane. I would cry. Ask Tim Monster. He got, oh man, he had to sit someplace else.
Why are you saying that? In my journey, because you're saying that, and it's something I've wanted to do. So I will do it when you have your panel, Ursula. My background, I have a master's in education. I've always wanted to provide, outside of being an artist, I'm an educator, a place and a safe space for people to come, be at an event, and be able to drop off their kids with people who actually have the knowledge to do it. So you do it, I will set up the space for the kids with my background in education. I will do that. I've worked with early childhood, my master's in early childhood education. My thesis was using the arts to promote the social and emotional well-being of children, especially Black and brown children. So you just let me know. I will set it up so that the children are in a safe space with safe, loving people who are educated, and not just educated in academia, but educated in life, so that
in us
families can feel like their children are fine and well cared for. That's what I'll do.
And so what this did was just reinforce what Marv was saying earlier and what you all have shared in that sense of community. Community meant one thing to us in the mid-90s. It means a different thing to us now in 2024.
Absolutely.
And so how can the lessons of Buttamilk and what was created there now move us forward into the now. It's more than just the history of the event. It's about what the community.
Yeah, there are so many dynamics. We've all grown up apart together in this thing at a certain time. It's why we still know each other.
But that is the power of Philadelphia.
Listen, nobody in their wildest dreams would just automatically write a story and say Nebraska, Philly, England.
England. No, they wouldn't. They wouldn't. I never told anybody. I just didn't tell people, because sometimes people get funny when you related to somebody that is a star in their eyes, whatever that is. Right. They are in a profession that makes them international, like you, Ursula, right? So for a long time, I just kept it to myself. But I said, why not? Since we talking about sharing stories, it's perfect opportunity to share.
I love this buttermilk storytelling.
I was like, basically, there's nothing else for me to ask or say after that. That is officially the way that we conclude this session, because wow, none of us saw that coming at all.
But the next time we can ask Marv and everybody, Marv, because you're on the thing, but you don't have to tell us right now, but I'm just saying, later, tell us how it feels to hear and feel all this real, actual love from all different kinds of people that are in their 50s or 40s or however everybody is or whatever now, and live life and shit, and how it feels. That is so amazing. You are loved.
It's filling me up with every session. Like you, Ursula. So I had heart surgery in October. So anything that where I think just a little bit beneath the surface, I start to bubble up. So I might need a moment. What I feel is I feel full, and I feel partially satisfied that these aims, this well-intentioned, us pure soul. I had a lot of love, brought up with a lot of love. And then my high school years actually weren't in Philly. I went to a prep school down in Virginia, which was a good experience. But what I probably did not know is that I craved connection with other Philadelphians who were older than 16, because I left at 13, went to college, and came back in my early 20s. So I'm like, I'm from here, but I need to be from here, and I need to be part of this city. Everything that I've absorbed in my life, from my family to WDAS and WHAT to Unity Day to walking around West Philly, to family reunions, Belmont Plateau, just all of it. The common denominator of all of it was togetherness. And when togetherness was happening, it was very simple. Usually happiness was mixed up in there, or a level of contentment, a level of enjoyment, a level of ease, right? And then from all that came self-expression. So that was in the bowl of buttermilk. Butter, flavor, milk, nourishment. That's the name. That's what we came up with. Flavor with nourishment. Nourishment with flavor. Yeah. And that's what my heart desired. And that's what happened. And then you fast forward 30 years, and sometimes I'm sitting here like, who and what and where? And for my own personal reasons, selfish reasons even, I was the DJ then. So I was showing up, I'm plugging in turntables, and I'm like thinking about my blends. And I missed out on a lot of conversation and interaction. I missed out on actual thank yous because show's over now. I'm unpacking the stuff. When I realized that I had these recordings from a couple of shows, it is 30 years later, literally. And when I came this close to leaving this place with that in this closet, and nobody would ever hear it, nobody would experience it, and who knows, it probably would have gotten thrown away. So when I think about all that, I'm like, nah, the preservationist, I'm a preservationist, and one of the things I like to preserve, we live life, we go through life, and we call the best, the most meaningful, the most touching experiences, right? And we carry that along. Hopefully we're able to shed some of the worst, or we have a balance of the good and bad that keeps us even and keeps us upright and not just stumbling and falling over. So, long answer, but this is Popeye drinking his spinach out the can for my soul. Like, I'm just, if my soul had muscles, they just popping up right now. So thank you for then, and thank you for now.
I just want to also say, Marv, because of you,
wow,
mixes. And I feel like lo-fi manifested from the mixes that you were making back in the day, right?
True.
To this day, I'm like, I want a good mix. I think I even still have some. So your music, it was just the soundscape to love, to togetherness, to community, to heal, to connection. Thank you.
Oh yeah.
I'm glad I asked, and I'm also done. Hey, listen. I hope, because I know, because it's listen, that has to be part of this film that's going to win awards. I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know what you're doing, but it's going to be a film that's going to win.
Thank you, Stephanie, for being the
voice.
And
that part right there, Marv, how beautiful. A poem. You just recited a poem. You got that written down over there?
Off the top.
Wow. How beautiful the words, the beautiful energy words. Oh my God, thank you. I'm like, wow, oh wow, one of the best Zooms since Zoom started.
There you go.
Well, thank you both for all that you poured into this conversation. You've given us.
I love y'all. This was awesome. This is the kind of that thing they call nostalgia. That's the kind of shit I like.
Mm-hmm. With a sprinkle of deja vu and some healing.
And some real shit and all the shit.
Yes. And Ursula, we share a commonality of just recently have lost our moms. I just want to give you light and love. I'm rooting for you in your heart. And I thank you for yours. Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna talk to you.
I know.
If that's cool with you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sis.
We love you both.
Love y'all. Thank you.
And yes, so I will be back in touch soon with more information on how this is going to progress. But definitely thank you for sharing some time with us this morning and sharing your heart, most importantly.
That's right. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Love y'all. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
That was such a touching way of reconnecting to what Buttamilk meant, not just to them, but to all of us, the growth, the reminder of our importance to each other, let alone to the people who were in the audience. Like, these folks became my friends, my collaborators. A lot of us have worked together again beyond the Buttamilk era in trying to create and grow and expand our talents in all kinds of tangible ways. And we started with that sample from Jill's debut album. Felicia was part of a group that got name checked in another song on that album. This is For all of the talk of cliquishness and Philadelphia being a closed community, I hope that as people have listened to the Sounds of Buttermilk podcast, that what they get more than anything else is what a family we were to each other and still are.
Absolutely. And I got to tell you, speaking on behalf of Buttermilk, we wouldn't have it any other way. It was a family affair at its heart and soul and core, an extension of Unity Day, of what we did at Unity Day, of how Buttermilk started at Unity Day. And believe me, it was partly my idea. My whole idea was that it was fertile ground, that it was a launching pad, that it was a stage for someone who might have stage fright, but also has something to say. We wanted to welcome people to explore themselves, explore their energy, absorb other people's offerings and energies. Very idealistic, but essentially it was a poetic family reunion.
And unapologetically Philly.
Yes, absolutely. Unapologetically Philly. It was the Joan.
Thank you for listening, everybody.
Thank you so much. Please check out the bonus episodes, which include the footage that you've been hearing without us jumping in between performances. And when I was researching all of this, I found out that when we did record performances, we also recorded a little bit of me DJing. And over 3 or 4 tapes, I got about a 2-hour DJ set of the cool beats that we were listening to back then. D'Angelo and all these eclectic acid jazz things.
I was going to say, Portishead. You introduced me to Portishead. So thank you.
Oh my goodness. But thank you so much, Stephanie. Because Stephanie, really, this would not have happened. This wouldn't without your help.
You just needed a little extra wrangling. I'm good at wrangling.
It's a continuum that started then. Look where we are now. And I can't wait to see where we're going next.